The insult. It was late one rainy night when Keanu Reeves and his old friend, Mark, stepped into a small diner hidden in the corner of a lonely street. The city lights outside glowed like tiny stars caught in puddles, but inside the diner, the air was warm and smelled of coffee and fried food. The bell above the door jingled softly, but no one really looked up except for a tired waitress leaning against the counter. Keanu wore a plain black hoodie and jeans. Mark looked even more ordinary in his worn-out coat. They both looked like two regular men just trying to get out of the cold. They picked a booth near the window, hoping to have some quiet time after a long day of helping at a local shelter. They wanted nothing more than hot food, some laughter, and a bit of peace before heading back out into the world that never seemed to rest. The waitress, Sandy, glanced at them from behind the counter. She whispered something to the cook, then rolled her eyes. She had been on her feet for hours, taking orders from people who barely looked at her, pretending to care when they left no tip at all. Tonight was no different, she thought. Just two broke guys who would sit for hours, drink one coffee, and leave her with nothing. She sighed and grabbed her notepad. When Sandy finally came over, her tone was sharp. "You gonna order something or just sit here all night?" she snapped. Her voice cut through the soft hum of the diner's old radio. Keanu looked up at her. His eyes were calm but deep, the kind that made you feel seen even when you didn't want it to be. He smiled gently. "Yes, ma'am. Can we please have 2 coffees? A slice of pie for my friend, and maybe your warmest soup." Sandy laughed, but it wasn't kind. "Soup? This ain't a charity, you know. You got money for that." Mark lowered his head, embarrassed. He hated being judged. He had once been a teacher, but life had fallen apart. After he lost his wife and daughter in an accident, he was rebuilding himself piece by piece, and Keanu was the only friend who stayed when others drifted away. Tonight was supposed to feel normal, but Sandy's words cut him open again. Keanu placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. He turned back to Sandy, his voice soft but steady. "We can pay, and if you're tired, we can wait. We don't mean to trouble you." Sandy scoffed. "Yeah, right? You look like you live under a bridge." She scribbled on her notepad with force, her pen nearly tearing the paper. "Fine, but you better not waste my time." As she walked away, Mark whispered, "Keanu, maybe we should go. We don't need this." But Keanu shook his head slowly. "Mark, sometimes people speak with anger because their heart is tired. Let's not judge her yet." Outside, the rain tapped the window gently, like soft fingertips asking to be let in. Inside, Mark felt the walls around his heart closing tighter. Every word Sandy threw at them felt like a reminder of how small he had become in the eyes of the world. Minutes later, Sandy slammed 2 chipped mugs of coffee on their table. The soup came in a bowl that was only half full, and the pie was just a tiny sliver. Almost mocking them, "Enjoy," Sandy said sarcastically, then turned on her heel and went back to the counter, where she laughed with another waitress about the homeless guy and his crazy friend. Keanu didn't touch his coffee right away. Instead, he looked at Sandy with eyes that didn't hold anger but a quiet sadness. He wondered how long she had carried her bitterness. He knew the weight of pain. He had carried his own grief for decades. He thought about his sister, his best friends he had lost, the nights he spent alone in empty hotel rooms after filming, staring at walls that never spoke back. He watched Sandy laugh as if the world owed her nothing but more reasons to hate. He knew he couldn't fix her in one night, but maybe, just maybe, he could remind her that kindness could still bloom in a place where darkness had been living too long. "Mark," Keanu said softly, "do you remember what you told me when my sister got sick?" Mark looked up, surprised. I said pain is never the end, Keanu. It just feels like it." Keanu smiled. "Yes, sometimes people like Sandy forget that. Maybe tonight we remind her." But Mark didn't understand how she doesn't care. Keanu stirred his coffee, watching the tiny whirlpool form and fade. "Kindness, my friend. Always kindness, no matter what." Meanwhile, Sandy kept glancing at them, confused. She had insulted them. She had humiliated them. But they just sat there, talking softly, no anger, no fight. It bothered her in a way she couldn't explain that an old man walked in from the storm, drenched to the bone, He shivered, dropping coins on the counter. "Just coffee, please," he said. His voice cracking. Sandy sighed, ready to bark at him too, but Keanu stood up before she could. He walked over, took off his own coat, and wrapped it around the old man's shoulders. "Sit with us, sir," Keanu said. "Have some soup, too. You need it more than we do." The old man looked at him like he was staring at a ghost. No one had been kind to him in so long that he had forgotten what it felt like. Sandy froze. Something twisted in her chest, a feeling she thought she had buried under layers of sarcasm and coldness. She didn't know why, but she felt tears pressing behind her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, angry at herself. As she wiped down the counter, she heard the old man ask Keanu, "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Keanu smiled, the same gentle smile he had given Sandy. "Because once someone gave me warmth when I was cold. We pass it on, or we lose it." Sandy turned away, but his words clung to her like the smell of fresh coffee in the morning. Soft, but impossible to ignore. What Sandy didn't know yet was that this simple act would pull a string inside her that she thought was long dead. By the end of this night, she would discover the truth about who these men really were, and that truth would change everything she believed about people, about kindness, and about herself. But for now, she watched from a distance, arms folded tightly over her chest, while the rain outside kept falling like the world was trying to wash itself clean. And deep in her heart, Sandy felt something she hadn't felt in years: shame, but also hope. The hidden truth. The rain did not stop that night. It fell harder, drumming on the diner's old windows like an impatient guest who wanted to be let inside. Sandy kept wiping down the same spot on the counter, her mind wandering back to the sight of Keanu wrapping his own coat around that old man. She didn't understand it. Kindness like that felt out of place in her world. In this city, people cared about themselves and nothing more. But here was this stranger giving warmth to someone who had nothing to offer back. She tried to push the feeling away. Her life had taught her that kindness was weakness, a trick people used to get something in return. She had learned it the hard way when her father left, when her mother drank herself into a grave, when every man she ever trusted turned his back on her. She had built walls so high that even she couldn't see over them now. But tonight, those walls trembled from her booth. Sandy watched Keanu and Mark share their food with the old man. They were laughing, even though the pie was gone and the soup bowl was empty. The old man looked different already, his shoulders no longer hunched quite so low. It was like the warmth in their voices melted the cold in his bones. Mark leaned forward, his voice low, but Sandy could still hear pieces of it. "Keanu, she hates us. Why do you try?" Keanu's answer was calm. "Because hate is heavy. Maybe she's tired of carrying it." Sandy felt her face flush with anger and shame. She wasn't tired of anything, she told herself. She was strong, because she kept her heart locked tight. She turned away, but the bell above the door jingled again, and she glanced up. A man in a fancy suit walked in, shaking rain off his umbrella. His shoes were shiny, his watch looked expensive, and his eyes scanned the diner like he owned it. Sandy straightened her apron and forced a smile. Customers like him tipped well if you played nice. "Good evening," she said, her voice softer now. "Table for one." The man ignored her greeting. He spotted Keanu and Mark instead. His lips curled in a sneer. Well, what do we have here?" Keanu turned to look at him, and something changed in his eyes. The warmth was still there, but now there was something else, like a door closing quietly in the back of his mind. "Hello, Darren," Keanu said, his voice steady. Mark stiffened beside him. The old man looked down, sensing the tension. Sandy was confused. Who was this man? How did he know them? Darren sauntered over to their table, his expensive cologne mixing oddly with the smell of stale coffee. "Didn't expect to find you here." "Keanu, slumming it with your charity cases again." Sandy's heart skipped. Keanu? He had said his name before, but she hadn't put it together. It couldn't be. She had seen his movies when she was younger on nights when the world felt too heavy. She'd lose herself in the stories of a man who always did the right thing, even when it hurt. But that was the screen. The man sitting here looked like any other lost soul. Keanu didn't flinch. "Darren, you're welcome to sit. or you can leave us be." Darren laughed, a cruel sound that made Sandy's skin crawl. "Leave you be? Come on, man. You're Keanu Reeves. You should be sipping wine with models, not handing your coat to bums." Mark's face flushed. The old man shrank into the booth. Sandy's stomach twisted. She felt like she was seeing the truth, but couldn't grab it yet. "What are you doing here?" Darren pressed on, leaning closer, his words dripping poison. "Trying to look like a saint. This town doesn't care. Man, these people will suck you dry and spit you out." Keanu looked him in the eyes. His voice was gentle, but each word struck like a quiet bell in the night. "Then maybe we remind the world that people can be better." Darren scoffed. He turned to Sandy. "Hey, waitress, you know who you've got in here? This man could buy this whole dump and fire you on the spot." Sandy felt like her feet were glued to the floor. She looked at Keanu, really looked at him. The calm eyes, the kindness, the quiet strength. It all made sense now. She had insulted him, mocked him, and he had done nothing but show patience. "Is this true?" she whispered. Her throat dried out. Keanu gave her a small nod. "I'm just a man having coffee," Darren snorted. "A man having coffee. Please, he's worth millions. Billions, maybe, and he's wasting his time here with losers." Keanu's eyes never left Sandy's. "Sometimes we find the best parts of people in the places no one wants to look." For a moment, the diner was silent. Even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Sandy wanted to say something, but the words tangled in her chest. Her anger was melting, replaced by something sharp and raw. Regret, shame, but also curiosity. "Why?" she asked him, her voice cracking. "Why here? Why help?" Keanu smiled, and it wasn't the smile she had seen in movies. It was real, tired, and kind. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. I know what it feels like when someone sees you anyway." Darren rolled his eyes, pathetic. Keanu stood slowly, his presence somehow larger now, though he never raised his voice. "Darren, you should go." But Darren wasn't done. He leaned across the table, his finger jabbing at Mark. "And you're just using him, you think. He's your ticket out of this gutter." Mark's hands trembled. He wanted to fight back, but the old fear choked him. Keanu stepped between them, his back to Mark, shielding him. "Don't speak to my friend that way," Keanu said, his tone like iron wrapped in velvet. The old man at the table suddenly spoke up, his voice soft but clear. "Some of us don't want money. We just want someone to remember we're human." Darren laughed again. "Keep dreaming, old man." But Sandy was no longer silent. She stepped forward, her hands clenched. "Sir, you need to leave." Darren turned, surprised. "Excuse me, you heard me," Sandy said, her voice shaking but stronger than it had been in years. "Get out." Darren looked at Keanu, then at Sandy, and smirked. "This place is trash. Enjoy your charity circus." He tossed a few coins on the counter, mocking the old man's earlier gesture, and pushed the door open. The rain swallowed him whole. The diner felt different now. The hum of the old fridge, the patter of the rain, and the silence between Sandy and Keanu. "I'm sorry," Sandy whispered, tears brimming. "I didn't know." Keanu reached across the counter, his hand covering hers gently. "You don't have to be sorry. You just have to remember." Sandy let the tears fall. They slid down her cheeks like rain down the window, cleansing something she had carried too long. In that quiet moment, a seed of change was planted in Sandy's heart. She didn't know it yet, but her life would never be the same again. And the truth about Keanu's visit was only just beginning to unfold. The open wound. Sandy did not sleep after her shift ended that night. She sat in the break room long after the last customer had left, the rain still whispering on the roof like an old secret. She held a chipped mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at the doorway where Keanu and Mark had left together with the old man. She could still see it. Keanu slipping a few folded bills into the old man's pocket, telling him to get a room for the night, telling him he mattered. She thought about the way Darren had spoken, how he had spit poison into every corner of the diner, and she thought about how Keanu had not raised his voice, had not fought fire with fire, but had stood taller by staying kind. Sandy did not understand people like him. In her world, people lied. They took what they could and left. when you needed them the most. Kindness was a mask people wore to get what they wanted. But something about Keanu's eyes had haunted her all night. There had been no judgment in them, no hate, only a softness that felt like sunlight on a cold winter morning. The door creaked open and Sandy jumped, pulling her sweater tight around her shoulders. It was the cook, Randy, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. "You still here?" he asked, surprised. "Yeah," Sandy said, her voice low. "Just thinking." Randy snorted. "Thinking about what?" "The big shot." "You believe all that?" "Probably some lookalike." Sandy shook her head. "It was him." Randy shrugged. "Doesn't matter. He's gone now. You're still stuck here." That stung more than she wanted to admit. She wanted to argue, but Randy just tossed the rag on the counter and left, the back door slamming behind him. Sandy stayed until the neon sign outside buzzed and flickered off with the sunrise. Then she stood, her legs stiff, her mind heavier than before. She needed answers. She needed to know why someone like him would sit in a place like this, giving warmth to people who gave him nothing in return. 2 days later, Sandy found herself standing outside the shelter. She held a cheap umbrella that did nothing to stop the drizzle from soaking her hair. The building looked rundown, with peeling paint and a sign that said "Hope Lives Here" hanging crooked above the door. She almost turned back. Her old self would have, but that look in Keanu's eyes pushed her forward. She stepped inside, the smell of old clothes and stale bread hitting her all at once. Inside, the place hummed with quiet chaos. Volunteers handed out blankets and warm meals, children's laughter mixed with coughing and low murmurs. Sandy felt out of place, like an intruder in a world she had always pretended didn't exist. "Can I help you?" a soft voice asked. Sandy turned. A young woman stood there, holding a clipboard, her smile gentle but tired. I'm looking for someone," Sandy said. "Keanu Reeves. I heard he helps here." The woman's eyes brightened a little. "Oh, you must mean the Tuesday run. He comes by with Mark. They bring food, clothes. Sometimes they just sit and talk. The kids love him." Sandy frowned. "Why?" "He doesn't have to do that." The woman shrugged. "Why does anyone do something good? Maybe it makes him feel human, too." Before Sandy could respond, she heard laughter behind her. She turned and saw him, Keanu, in that same black hoodie, his hair a little wet from the rain. He was kneeling beside a small girl who couldn't have been more than 6. She had tangled hair and dirty cheeks, but her eyes were bright as she showed him a drawing she had made. Keanu held the paper gently, like it was something priceless. "This is amazing," he told the girl. "Is that your puppy?" The girl giggled. "It's you and the puppy. You gave him food, remember?" Keanu laughed softly. "I remember. Best puppy ever." When the girl ran off, Keanu stood and saw Sandy. His eyes softened immediately. "Sandy, I didn't expect to see you here." Sandy felt her throat close. She hated how small her voice sounded. "Why do you do this?" Keanu tucked the drawing into his pocket. "Because once, people did it for me." "But you don't need to," Sandy pressed. "You're famous. You could be anywhere doing anything." Keanu looked around the shelter, at the faces that turned to him with smiles that had nothing to do with his movies or his money. "This is real, Sandy. This is life. All the other stuff, it comes and goes. But people remember how you made them feel when they had nothing." Sandy shook her head. "I was awful to you. I said terrible things." Keanu smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "I know. But you were tired. People hurt others when they're hurting, too." Sandy's eyes stung with tears. "How do you forgive so easily?" Keanu's voice dropped, gentle but carrying an ache that Sandy could feel in her bones. "Because I've been forgiven for things I thought I'd carry forever. I don't want that weight for you." She wiped her eyes, embarrassed. "It's too late for me." Keanu stepped closer, his voice steady. "It's never too late. Your heart still knows what's right. That's enough." Sandy wanted to believe him, but a lifetime of disappointment screamed in her mind that nothing ever changed. She forced a weak laugh. "Do you ever get tired of trying to fix broken people?" Keanu looked at her with that same calm, unwavering kindness. "I don't fix people. I remind them they're not alone." Before Sandy could answer, Mark approached, carrying a box of donated blankets. He gave Sandy a small nod. No bitterness in his eyes. He had heard what she said at the diner, yet here he was, treating her like she belonged. "Mark, this is Sandy." "Keanu," said. Mark smiled. "Good to see you again. We're short on hands." "You wanted to help?" The question stunned her. Her instinct was to say no, to run back to the diner, to her walls and her sarcasm. But something heavy cracked inside her. She nodded. Double quotes. "Yeah," she whispered. "I want to help." Keanu's smile was warm. "Good. Stay with us today. Maybe tomorrow, too." Sandy picked up a blanket from the box. It smelled of old soap and hope. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe she was more than the worst things she'd ever done. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and for Sandy, it felt like her storm might be ending, too. Cracks in the wall. Sandy did not know how she found the courage to come back the next day. Maybe it was the way Keanu had looked at her, like she wasn't just another tired waitress who snapped at strangers. Maybe it was the way Mark had handed her that blanket without judgment, like she was already part of something bigger than herself. Whatever it was, it pulled her back to the shelter before the sun had even warmed the streets. She wore her old jeans and a faded sweater, the same clothes she wore at the diner when she worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. But today, they didn't feel like her uniform of defeat. They felt like a small step forward. Inside the shelter, the air was alive with movement. Volunteers packed brown bags of food. Kids giggled as they chased each other between tables stacked with donated clothes. Sandy stood by the door, unsure where to begin when she saw Keanu helping a teenage boy repair a broken backpack. He looked up, eyes warm as always. "Sandy, glad you came back." Sandy tried to smile. "Yeah, I wasn't sure if I would." Keanu nodded. "Sometimes showing up is the hardest part." Mark appeared beside her, carrying a tray of sandwiches. "Want to help me hand these out?" Sandy took the tray without a word. As she moved through the crowded room, her hands trembled. Every thank you from a stranger felt like a tiny light flickering in a part of her she thought was dead. She had spent so long waiting for someone to see her pain, but she had never stopped to see anyone else's. Near the back, she found a woman sitting alone with a little boy curled up against her. The woman's eyes were hollow, her clothes threadbare. Sandy knelt and held out a sandwich. The woman hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. The boy peeked out from under his mother's arm. He was thin, hair tangled, but his eyes were bright blue, too bright for a world this dark. Sandy felt something crack in her chest. She gently brushed a crumb off his cheek, and he didn't flinch. "What's his name?" Sandy asked softly. "Joey," the woman said, voice breaking. "He's 5. Sandy swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to ask where the boy's father was, but she already knew life had taken something from them, just like it had from her. And here they were, trying to hold on to whatever pieces were left. "You're safe here," Sandy said, surprised by her own words. "We'll take care of you." The woman's eyes filled with tears. Sandy felt her own heart shiver, but it didn't break this time. It opened. Later, as the afternoon sun slipped through the dusty windows, Sandy found herself sitting at a table with Keanu, Mark, and a few other volunteers. They were eating soup, talking softly. The shelter's walls, once so cold and cracked, seemed to breathe warmth around them. "That boy Joey," Sandy said suddenly, looking at Keanu. "He reminded me of my brother." Keanu waited, giving her space to speak. "When I was young," Sandy continued, staring at her chipped bowl, "my dad left. My mom fell apart. My little brother, he was just a kid. I was the one who fed him, bathed him, tried to keep him safe, but one day I couldn't. He got sick. I didn't have the money for medicine. I blamed myself. I think I still do." The table was quiet. No one interrupted. Sandy felt her confession settle in the room like dust on old furniture. "I spent so long hating the world," Sandy said. "Hating myself. I thought if I shut everyone out, I wouldn't get hurt again." Keanu's voice was calm, like a steady river. "Sometimes the walls we build to keep pain out also keep healing from coming in." Sandy looked at him, her eyes red. "Why do you care so much about people like me? You don't owe us anything." Keanu leaned back, thinking. When I was young, I lost people too. My dad left. I lost friends I loved more than life. I lost a child before I ever got to hold them. I lost the woman I thought I'd grow old with. I know what grief tastes like. I know what it does when it buries itself in your bones. Sandy felt her breath catch. She had read the headlines, the tragic stories that had followed him for years. But hearing it in his voice, simple, raw, human, made it real in a way no news article ever could. I learned, Keanu went on, his eyes on hers, that grief can grow like weeds if you feed it anger and blame. But if you feed it love, it becomes a garden. Maybe not the one you wanted, but one you can share. Sandy covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. Mark reached over and squeezed her arm. His touch gentle, no pity, just understanding. As the day faded, Sandy helped sweep the floors. She watched Keanu laugh with kids who had no home to return to. Watched him sit with an old man who spoke to him like he was an old friend. She saw him treat every soul like they mattered. No cameras, no spotlight, just a man who knew what pain was and refused to let it win. When the work was done, she stepped outside with Keanu. The evening air was crisp, the streetlights flickering on one by one. She hugged herself against the chill. I don't know how to fix my life, Sandy said. Staring at the wet pavement, Keanu looked at her, eyes gentle but clear. Don't fix it all at once. Just fix this moment. Show up, be kind, forgive yourself. It's enough. Sandy felt something like hope stir inside her. It was fragile, like a match in a storm, but it was real. Will you come back tomorrow? Keanu asked. She nodded. Yeah, I think I will. They stood in silence as the streetlights hummed, and for the first time in years, Sandy felt like the darkness might not swallow her whole. But what she didn't know was that her test was still waiting for her, and soon, the past she had buried so deep would come knocking, demanding to be faced. Ghosts of the past. Sandy woke up the next morning, with the sun on her face for the first time in months. She had not slept well, but it was not the same old restless tossing. This time, her mind kept replaying the way the little boy Joey had smiled at her, the way Mark had treated her like she mattered, the way Keanu had listened without judgment. It was like a single light in a long, dark tunnel. She was afraid to trust it, afraid it would flicker out if she breathed too hard. But it was there. She made herself a cup of instant coffee in her tiny apartment. The walls were cracked, the sink leaked, the heater barely worked. But she looked at it all differently this morning. It was still her life, still broken, but maybe not hopeless. As she walked to the shelter, she felt the weight of her old life tug at her ankles like chains. Memories came uninvited, her mother's shouting, her brother's small voice when he was sick, the look on his face when she couldn't save him. She almost turned back. She almost let the ghosts drag her down. But then she remembered Keanu's words. Fix this moment. Just this one. When she reached the shelter, she saw Mark outside, loading boxes of food into an old van. He waved. You're early, Sandy shrugged, hiding her nerves. Couldn't sleep. Mark grinned. Good. We're doing a run today, handing out blankets and food to folks who can't make it here. Wanna come? Sandy hesitated. The streets scared her. She had seen what lived in the shadows, the people she used to pretend didn't exist. But Mark waited patiently, never pushing. Yeah, she said. I'll go. The van rattled down cracked streets as the city woke up slowly. Keanu drove, eyes focused, humming softly to a song playing on the old radio. Sandy sat in the back with Mark, sorting sandwiches and small cartons of juice. She felt out of place but useful, her hands moving on their own. They parked by an underpass where tents and makeshift shelters clung to the concrete. Like desperate dreams, people came out, wrapped in blankets too thin for the cold. Some looked suspicious, some too tired to care. Mark jumped out first, greeting them with a smile that made him look younger. Sandy stepped out slowly, clutching a box of sandwiches. A young woman with matted hair approached her, eyes sharp. What's this? The woman asked, her voice hard. It's food, Sandy said. No strings, just food. The woman snatched two sandwiches, stuffed them into her coat, and walked away without a thank you. Sandy felt the old bitterness rise in her throat. Why did she bother? Why care when people didn't even see you? Keanu came up beside her, reading her face like an open book. It's not about how they take it, he said softly. It's about how you give it. Sandy sighed, staring at the woman's fading figure. But what if they don't want help? Keanu placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then you help anyway, because that's who you are now. His words sank into her bones. That's who you are now. Could she really be someone new? Could she be better? They worked for hours, giving out what little they had. Mark found a man shivering near a pile of soaked blankets and wrapped him in a dry one. Keanu knelt beside a teenager who had a black eye, speaking to him so gently that the boy finally looked up, his hard expression cracking just enough to show. The child still hiding underneath. Sandy found herself alone for a moment, standing near the van, when a voice behind her made her freeze. Well, look at you, little Sandy the savior. She turned, and her stomach twisted. Darren stood there. The same expensive coat, the same cruel smile. His shoes were spotless, a sharp contrast to the mud and trash around him. What are you doing here? Sandy spat, her hands clenching. Oh, just checking up on my favorite waitress, Darren sneered. You really think these people care about you now? You think you're one of them? Sandy felt heat rising in her chest. I'm trying to do something good. Darren laughed. Good, you? Come on, you're the same broken girl who cursed out every customer, who drank herself stupid in the alley behind the diner. You think handing out sandwiches erases that? Asterisk. His words stabbed deep. Sandy saw her old self, every mistake replaying behind her eyes. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But then she saw Keanu in the distance, his calm presence grounding her like an anchor in a storm. You don't get to tell me who I am anymore, Sandy said, her voice trembling but stronger than before. Darren's eyes narrowed. Careful, Sandy. These charity heroes, they'll drop you the second you screw up. People like you don't get happy endings. Keanu appeared at her side like a shadow turning into light. He stepped between her and Darren, his eyes calm but sharp. Leave. Darren smirked, still playing saint. Reeves, you can't save her. She's poison. Keanu didn't flinch. People can change. Now go. Darren looked at Sandy, his smile cruel. You think this fixes you? You'll always be trash. And then he turned, his footsteps echoing as he disappeared into the mess of tents and concrete. Sandy's hands shook. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She turned to Keanu, her voice cracking. Maybe he's right. Maybe. I'm just pretending. Keanu reached out, his hand gentle on her shoulder. No one is pretending when they choose to be better. You're not that girl anymore, Sandy. You're here. You're trying. That's real. She looked into his eyes, searching for doubt. There was none, only belief. Belief in her when she could not yet believe in herself. That night, Sandy sat alone on the steps of her apartment building. The cold crept through her sweater, but she didn't move. She replayed Darren's words over and over, each one a ghost of her past clawing at her ribs. But then she remembered the woman who had taken the sandwich for her son. She remembered the old man who had smiled when she placed a blanket around his shoulders. She remembered Keanu's voice. This is who you are now. She didn't know if she could be the person he saw in her, but maybe, just maybe, she could try. Again tomorrow. Inside, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. Soup run tomorrow at dawn. Come if you can. Bring your smile. Sandy read it twice, a small, trembling smile forming on her lips. She texted back, I'll be there. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if she would ever be free of her past. But for the first time in her life, Sandy understood that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to be better. In spite of it, and in the darkness of her small apartment, Sandy let herself believe that maybe she deserved that chance. The light that stayed when Sandy woke the next morning. The city was still wrapped in dawn's pale light. For a few moments, she lay there listening to the quiet. No shouting, no angry voices in her head. Just the soft hum of her small fridge and the faint tap of rain on her window. She thought about ignoring Mark's message, letting the old fear pull her back under the blankets. It would be easy to stay who she had always been. But Keanu's words drifted back. This is who you are now. She whispered it to herself like a prayer. She got up, pulled on her faded sweater, and left her apartment before doubt could follow her. At the shelter, Mark was already packing the van. He grinned when he saw her. "Look who showed up." Sandy shrugged, trying to hide her shy smile. "Told you I would." Keanu was inside, tying up boxes of warm soup and fresh bread. He looked tired, but when he saw her, his eyes brightened the same way they always did, like he saw more than the worn-out clothes and the scars she carried inside. Like he saw the part of her that was still good. "Ready?" he asked. Sandy nodded. "Ready." They drove through the sleepy streets, the city waking up slow and gray. They stopped under bridges, at old bus stops, in alleys where people gathered in small clusters to stay warm. Sandy handed out cups of soup, her fingers numb from the cold, but her heart beating warm. Every thank you, every quiet smile, every hand that brushed hers reminded her she was more than what she used to be. They stopped at the same underpass where they had seen Darren days before. Sandy felt her chest tighten when she stepped out of the van. She looked around, half expecting him to appear again, to throw her past in her face. But the only thing that greeted her was the sound of cars overhead and the quiet voices of people waiting for breakfast. She found the young woman from before, the one who had grabbed sandwiches for her son. The woman was sitting on an old blanket, her boy curled against her side. They looked so small under the concrete sky. "Hey," Sandy said softly, kneeling down. "I brought you something." She handed the boy a cup of warm soup, his little hands wrapped around it like it was treasure. The woman looked up, eyes tired but softer than before. "Why do you do this?" the woman asked, voice cracking. "Why help us?" Sandy thought about all the times she had asked herself that same question. She thought about her brother's small hands, the night she had spent crying in the dark, believing she was beyond saving. She thought about Keanu, about Mark, about the way they kept showing up for people who gave them nothing in return. "Because someone reminded me I'm not alone," Sandy said. "And you're not alone, either." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She reached out, gripping Sandy's hand tight. They sat like that for a moment, of broken people holding each other up, under an old bridge while the world sped past overhead. Back at the shelter, the last boxes were empty. Mark leaned against the van, sipping a cup of leftover soup. Keanu sat beside Sandy on the steps, watching the sun break through gray clouds. "You did good today," Keanu said. Sandy laughed softly. "I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing." Keanu shook his head. "None of us do. We just do what we can." Sandy looked at him. Really looked, this man who carried so much pain, but refused to let it harden him. "Why do you keep doing this, Keanu? You could live anywhere, do anything. Why stay in places like this with people like us?" Keanu's eyes were gentle, but deep with old grief. "Because I've had all the money, all the fame, but this," he said, nodding at the shelter, the city around them, the people with nothing but each other. "This is real. You don't lose this when the lights go out." Sandy felt her throat tighten. She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small. "Will you keep coming back?" she asked instead. Keanu smiled. "As long as there's good to do, I'll keep showing up." She felt the warmth of that promise settle in her bones. She knew life would not be easy. She knew Darren's words would echo in her head some nights when the shadows grew loud again. But she also knew something stronger now, that one act of kindness could pull you back from the edge. That people were not only what they had done, but also what they chose to do next. That night, Sandy returned to the diner for her shift. She wore the same apron, took the same orders, and heard the same grumbles from tired customers. But everything felt different when an old man came in, wet and shivering. She did not roll her eyes or snap at him. Instead, she poured him hot coffee, gave him extra soup, and sat with him for a minute just to listen. A regular at the counter watched her, frowning. "What's got into you tonight, Sandy?" Sandy smiled, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Just trying to remember people matter." The regular laughed like it was the strangest thing he'd ever heard. But Sandy didn't care. She turned to wipe the counter, feeling the warmth in her chest like a small fire that would not go out. Later, as she locked up for the night, she saw a piece of paper stuck to the window. It was the little boy Joey's drawing, her, Mark, Keanu, and the boy, all standing under a bright sun. Sandy pressed her hand to the glass, her breath catching for the first time in a long time. She didn't feel like the waitress who snapped at people or the girl who had failed her brother. She felt like Sandy, someone who was broken, but trying, someone who was worth saving, someone who would keep showing up. And outside, under the hum of the neon diner sign, the night felt less dark than before.